Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The program will begin in 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please move to your seats and help us start on time. Please set your electronic devices to silent, but keep them at the ready so that you can text or email your questions for our guest speakers to the address on the screen, askmetna@gmail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. On behalf of AFCEA International and the AFCEA Greater Augusta Chapter, welcome to Day 3 of TechNet Augusta. As a reminder, please set your electronic devices to silent, but keep them at the ready so that you can text or email your questions for this morning's session to askmetna@gmail.com. Prior to the conference, AFCEA asked our network of industry partners to submit solutions to 8 problem statements provided by the Army Cyber Center of Excellence. We received more than 50 responses and selected 19 to be presented this week in the Engagement Theater in the exhibit hall. We have published all of the submissions in a compendium you can find by selecting Solution Abstracts under the Program tab on the TechNet Augusta website. We would also like to recognize all of our supporting partners for helping make TechNet Augusta possible. Please join me in thanking all of our supporting partners. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Colonel Mike Black, U.S. Air Force retired, Vice President for Defense, AFCEA International.
All right, good morning, and those that have attended these before know that that is Susan's song, okay? So make sure you tell her when you talk to her that we were thinking about her this morning, Uptown Funk. All right, so welcome to the final day of TechNet Augusta. It's been an outstanding week. We are proud to present this professional forum, this educational experience, a team-building opportunity for our government, industry, and academia partners. 3 days we look at this, one mission. TechNet Augusta delivered on its theme, non-kinetic dominance in a multi-domain operations. With AI-led cybersecurity, zero trust momentum, edge drones, electromagnetic warfare, plus quantum cryptography, and Gen AI-driven command and control. Now, Signal Media, the official media of AFCEA, is providing daily coverage of TechNet Augusta. And you can see from the slide that's up, and additional recordings and presentations from this week's session that are authorized for release will be available post-event on the AFCEA website. Now it's my pleasure to invite from Mantech International, Diary McGuire, Vice President, Defense Sector, Army, to introduce our closing keynote speaker.
President and Army Division Manager, and Mantech is a proud sponsor of sponsoring partner for TechNet Augusta. My team and I have had the pleasure and the opportunity to speak to several government clients and industry peers already this week, highlighting the investments and solutions that we have in cyberspace superiority, intelligent engineering, and data and AI tied to the current advancing mission need. If you have not spoken with us or had the opportunity, we welcome you to come visit us directly across the hall in Welch A to hear more about how we are always advancing innovative ideas into improved processes and fieldable outcomes. And now for today's keynote focus, as our nation and the Army undergo significant change to better orient our future structure and to accelerate the modernization of our tactical systems infrastructure, who better to share with us on this topic other than a man whose entire career has been dedicated to applying engineering concepts and business acumen to the effectiveness of the warfighter and the mission. This morning's keynote speaker is Mr. Joe Welch, Deputy to the CG of Army Futures Command, where he works directly with the Army and DoD leadership to accelerate the Army's modernization and transformation efforts. He's well known for his prior leadership of DEVCOM C5ISR Center, providing timely and relevant research and development, prototypes, and innovative technology applications that help to drive the next generation concept roadmap. With 25 years of civilian service supporting the Army, Mr. Welch brings a wealth of information and understanding to this week's discussion. So, Mr. Welch, thank you for taking the time to address us, and can we welcome him?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Diary and Mike, for the introduction, and thanks to the Greater Augusta AFCEA chapter and General Jankovic and the Cyber Center of Excellence. Really a pleasure to be here. Early in the morning to address you all. I'm glad to see we have as many folks as we do already. I'm sure it was a great evening catching up and maybe staying up a little bit too late, but I'm thrilled to be here and recognizing that, that our audience here is made up, of largely soldiers, civilians, and our signal, cyber, electronic warfare domains, industry associated with that. It occurred to me that, some of the main themes of Army transformation, are directly relevant to this audience. And so I wanted to start by talking about a little bit of those. And when I'm talking about Army transformation initiatives, I'm referring to the memo that the Secretary of Defense signed back at the end of April, directing Army transformation and laying out some pretty clear timelines that are in the not too distant future of things that, we as the Army need to accomplish. Among those are, establishing dominance of the electromagnetic spectrum by 2027. So I know that's been a big theme of the conference here this year and a lot of the panels and great discussion. And I know there's been a lot of good feedback on that. And, I'm glad that's part of the discussion. There's a technology element to that. There's a force structure element to that, training, and just an overall approach. You could look at electromagnetic dominance by 2027 as a massive challenge or a significant opportunity that it's been called out in the way that it has. And I guess my encouragement to you would just be to think about what stops us from achieving that, right? I mean, I think there's enough expertise in here, various assignments, various understandings of different technologies and things like that to kind of understand what may stand in our way. And I think the earlier we can recognize that, the better a shot we're going to have at achieving that goal for that's laid out by the SecDef. Another, bit of direction in that memo was establishing AI-driven command and control at our theaters, corps, and divisions, also by 2027. And we're, I think, well on the way toward creating the environment that will allow that. We certainly don't have that today, but we've certainly recognized, and a lot of the assembled leadership in the front here has done an outstanding job in driving this home and driving the priorities to get more data-centric, right? To have our data in a place that we can access, manipulate, do things with it. I mean, you really can't get AI enabled with data scattered in a bunch of different places. And so that's been the impetus behind the next generation command and control effort. And so, I feel like we're on the cusp now of being able to rapidly adapt and integrate AI-enabled tools for decision dominance. We've been really waiting on that main part, so excited about that. SecDef also talked about realigning our forces and generating combat power to synchronize kinetic and non-kinetic fires, space-based capabilities, as well as unmanned systems. And of course, a lot of that synchronization is goes back to the earlier one on AI-driven command and control. The synchronization of kinetic and non-kinetic certainly includes the electronic warfare aspect. And I think that bit of direction is a reflection that this isn't just a technology problem. We need to be able to design and organize our force structures and train them in a way that is in alignment with what we're trying to do from a technology perspective. And then there was some organizational direction that was contained in the Army Transformation Order from the SecDef, including some combinations of command to include the combination merger of Army Futures Command and Training and Doctrine Command. And so I'll dwell on that for a moment, near and dear to my heart, certainly as a member of the Futures Command leadership team, and just reflect a little bit back on that. AFC is relatively young organization, just past 7 years here, really stood up to focus on what was, then, we talked about modernization and that Army modernization priorities, and over time really became, the mantle of Army transformation as delegated by the chief, and so with a really specific focus on some of our acquisition efforts and improving the sort of the focus and speed of delivery. So if you think back on the, those original Army modernization efforts, I mean, by and large, there have been some exceptions, some challenges, but by and large, we have achieved momentum in those areas and working with our partners within ASALT. More recently, AFC has been focused into the broader .mil PF space, and I think that's going to continue moving forward. Contrast that with Training and Doctrine Command. So we go from 7 years with AFC to more than 50 years as a major Army command, established out of the kind of the conclusion of the Vietnam War and our transition to an all-volunteer Army. And the mission they had was to be able to train, equip, organize, and lead our Army to be the premier land fighting force in the world. And they have, and they've succeeded in that, and we remain that way. But there's a lot of risk ahead. The interaction of these different elements, I think makes all the sense in the world to start bringing those together. I mean, it's not long ago that we had a concept of how we would get a capability out in the field, and it would be along the lines of we'd have a requirement for it, and we'd contract for it, and we would take delivery of it, and we would test it, assess, train it, and I'm not sure that's the really the world we're going to be in now with the way the technology threat, everything else is moving. So it could be something more along the lines of we go from a concept, training concepts instead of training on boxes, and using feedback from our training in order to inform our own material development processes. I mean, so I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. But looking back a little bit, there's some successes. I think that come to my mind. The one that I would probably focus on, most significantly, I think, from a Futures Command perspective, at least over the last couple of years, has been really the transformation of what we do within the Army requirements process. So, it's no longer that we've got sort of a straight line process of, in the beginning there was a requirement, and then, it moved into these other areas to go take that requirement into an actual capability. As I just mentioned, we just, I think we need a little bit of, number one, intellectual humility. We just don't know what we don't know. So when you think about where does a requirement come from, it could come from a lot of different places. Increasingly, we're seeing them come from our transformation and contact units, which is a great place to get that, because that's our, those are the men and women that are actually going to use, this equipment, and we can get very direct feedback on that. And the increasing commercialization and software basis of a lot of the things that we use makes that easier. So that's one place they can come from. It can be threat informed as well, though. If we understand where our adversaries are going, it can imply that we need to have some type of a counter capability to it, or something that can survive it. Technology, I mean, that's just, the curve that we're on right now in terms of the tech development iteration cycle is pretty massive. And so, these are all things that argue really against this notion of a straight line, here's the requirement, and then go off and, assume that there's nothing that we're going to learn about what that requirement should look like, what the parameters should be. So I guess if you're in here, if you're an Army requirements writer or a capability manager or capability developer, I'd ask you, as you look around at the technology that companies here are demoing, or what you see, in a tick rotation or anywhere really. I mean, any of this information you're taking in, ask yourself, are the requirements that you may have a hand in or be responsible for, are they enabling in terms of, those new capabilities, or are they constraining? I think that's an increasing role that we're going to have to take when we look at how we generate requirements. If you're on the program management side, our PM community, I would respectfully ask you to kind of ban from your vocabulary the statement, we don't have a requirement for that. That's a very commonly cited phrase that comes up when there's a bit of new technology that looks like it might solve a problem. And I understand what's behind it. I don't dispute, I don't think we have a requirement for everything, so we do have to be a little bit specific, but it tends to be kind of a conversation ender to say, that's great, but we don't have a requirement for that. So, for our PM community, I guess I would ask, you to let us know and have that discussion with the community. If you see something that you think could be significantly improving based on a new technical design, a company that we didn't used to know about, these are discussions we need to have. We don't want to be in the business of saying, well, there's no requirement, because maybe there is. Maybe when we learn about what it is and the capabilities that are available that we weren't previously aware of, there could be. And then, for our industry community, I'd ask you to have a little patience with us as we work through those other two areas. I know we've really incentivized you over time to react exactly to what we're asking for, and really nothing more, nothing less. I mean, that's the structure of, kind of getting on contract is being very positively responsive to what we say we need and kind of not going in a bunch of different directions. But we're going to need to continue to learn what could be better than what we're currently asking for. And so I would just, ask for your, support in working that with us as we kind of continue to transform. So from an AFC perspective, a lot of this thought has culminated in, and we've talked about this in a lot of other forums, the concepts of things like characteristics of need, very broadly stated, really descriptions of a problem, not descriptions of a solution, very brief. Try to reorient the system toward we're not designing these documents to go buy specific things. We're there to describe problems and enable the American tech workforce to be able to support us and what those solutions might look like. So I foresee that continuing in the Army requirements approval process. Looking backward from a requirements process, we have a lot of cleanup to do. The Army has something on the order of 1,600 active requirements documents. And so our secretary recently gave Futures Command a challenge to take a look at how could we take a whack at, let's say, a third of those requirements, right? I mean, it's quite a lot, and some of them are, obviously for larger things, and some of those have been pretty well reported, as part of Army transformation efforts. But there's a lot of smaller things in there too, things that you might not even recognize, but they tend to bleed resources, efforts, and it's just a lot. So. That's a challenge that we've taken on. We have taken a look at up to a third of our active requirements. Some of them really just need to go away, aren't relevant anymore. Others, we may not be so sure about, but I think our response on that is going to be to tag them for revalidation, right? So if it's important to some constituency somewhere within the Army, we're going to expect that those organizations are going to come up on the net and say, okay, no, we don't want you to get rid of this because this is actually really important, and here's why. But if that doesn't happen, if no one comes up and says this is an important one for us, then that's probably going to go, divested as well. And then there's this category of things that exist in a lot of different areas, but could just be combined better together. So I think Next Gen C2 has been a great example of that. We're currently upwards of 70 individual approved requirements documents that we've subsumed really into a singular requirement with annexes and appendices for Next Gen C2. And I think we have several dozen more that we're still looking at. I mean, we're probably going to end up somewhere on the order of taking care of about 20% of that bogey to reduce requirements just in the things that were aligned or could be aligned into Next Gen C2. So, I think there's just tremendous potential in continuing to reform our requirements processes to be able to better address the capabilities that are needed in the Army. Next Gen C2. So I mentioned that, and I know that's been a big topic here. Here it was a packed house at the panel event yesterday, and I appreciate everybody's continued interest in what we're doing in that area. I do think it's going to end up being a model of how we acquire large sets of capability moving forward in other Army areas. So I think it's really trailblazing in that area. We just talked about requirements, or I just talked a moment ago about it, but also organizationally, right? Like how do we operationally enable software and AI? What are those skills that our soldiers need? Are they resonant in current MOSs and career fields? What would a new look at that kind of look like? How is that needed at Corps, at Division? How does that compare to how our force structure is today? I mean, we've been kind of experimenting with that through our software factory, for software operations down in Austin, our AI integration center for AI-enabled operations up in Pittsburgh, and I think that's a big element of it, from a non-material side. Contracting for NGC2, and we've talked a lot about that in the past. I think we're really breaking the mold in at least a couple of areas on that, right? So the first is we took an effort that really came up through our lab system as part of an experiment, and we have maintained the momentum and the success of that as we look forward into an acquisition effort that is focused on prototyping. So And that's really been enabled through some authorities that have been relatively recently passed through Congress that really just eliminate that or enable us to avoid that valley of death that typically occurs when we have a lab-based effort, and then we consider what an acquisition of a further matured capability might look like. I mean, we basically just wipe that out through those authorities and that ability to maintain momentum. And so the message I want you to take away from that, especially if you're in industry, is that as you're working with our lab systems, understand that the Army and the DoD, we do have this flexibility. We are able to more rapidly move into prototyping and even production based on those. So maybe there's still a valley of death, but if it exists, maybe people aren't paying enough attention to the way that they can move things forward. The other success on contracting, I think, is while we're maintaining momentum, we want to have continued competition. So we've been leveraging commercial solutions openings in order to continue to grow what that set looks like, give us some options and things to look at. That's going to end up wrapping up, every indication I have is that that's going to be within 3 months, right, from request for white paper all the way to the award of that next phase there. So we're able to move very, very rapidly on very significant efforts through these tools that have been given to us by Congress and then further emphasized through executive order, SecDef memorandum, et cetera. So really excited about the trailblazing we're doing on the contracting front in that area. I know there's a lot of interest from a technology provider perspective about how do you get involved in next-gen C2, right? And understand that the phase we're in right now, yes, we're looking at technology solutions and how they work together under that full stack concept, but we're also really looking at this concept of industry team lead and team of teams, and we're kind of looking into what is the best construct for that. How is the government able to most effectively partner with an industry team lead that can bring not a set of teammates that's static, but really evolve over time. These may be teammates that the government directs on. These may be teammates that our industry team lead is able to find. That to me is going to be the secret sauce for how this will be an enduring success story for industry government partnership. So that's the focus on team leads. From a component perspective, I think that we're very aware that we need to establish opportunities for technology to kind of individual technology elements to kind of potentially onboard into that. I think that's going to end up being a partnership between the government and the team leads that we'll have on contract to be able to enable that. It's top of mind for me how we can create the environment so that we can kind of rapidly assess capability, and if it looks like it's going to solve one of our problems, be able to plug it in. And that's sort of somewhat disconnected, or not necessarily the same as whatever teams would win initial awards. As I said, that's kind of a starting point, but we're going to continue to be open to new technology areas. And we also owe you kind of a description over time about where we continue to see challenges, where we think we have solutions, where we think we may even have something that we could standardize upon. We're going to be putting that out to you for comment and feedback to make sure that we've exhausted all of our opportunities to look at everything that we should be considering. And if you are in the software domain, I'll just make a pitch for if you're already selling software to us, we want to have a conversation about how you're doing that. There's actually an RFI out right now that's asking vendors that are selling software to the Army, and I know I was just talking about NGC2, but this is really a lot larger than that. It could be at the enterprise level, operational installation, wherever. We want to hear from you. We're trying to get a handle on how many different times we are buying, essentially identical capability. Are we buying them direct in every case? How many different contracts? What are the different prices we're paying? How many of them are going through resellers? Is there advantage, disadvantage to any of that? And so we're very interested in doing more of the enterprise type deals that will allow, give us greater benefit from a pricing perspective, and hopefully give you better things like understanding of our consolidated demand signals. So if you're in the business of selling software to us, if you haven't seen that RFI out yet, I encourage you to take a look at sam.gov and pull it up. We really would like to see your responses on that. So So as I conclude here, and I'll get to questions in a moment, just want to talk a little bit about, some of the way ahead. So, I can say that, AFC working with ASALT and other commands, including Army Material Command, Army Contracting Command, Test and Evaluation Command, we're actively looking at ways that we can continue momentum under models like we've done with NGC2, but more broadly to figure out how can we synchronize our activities in a more effective way. All these aspects of the material development life cycle, that sort of like going from a linear process to more iterative. I mean, I don't see that ending. And so we've been in discussions with everyone about how we can do that, how we can move from concepts of program of record into really like output-driven capabilities that are keeping pace with technological change and also keep everybody, everybody partnered together throughout all of that, right? Not here's the stage for early tech development, here's the stage for acquisition, here's the stage for test, here's the stage for contracting and sustainment, et cetera. And so, some of the elements of what we're looking at within there is, how can we greater empower teams to synchronize that activity? How can we hold them accountable for those? If we're going to go to output-driven, how can we hold them accountable? How can we develop inherent trade space so that when we're looking at a given capability, we actually have the ability to change the requirement potentially, change the funding allocation, change the way that we're doing the acquisition. We can do all those things today. It's just our processes aren't really well designed around collections of capabilities and output driven. They're really driven on a more individual program basis. And so that's some of the active discussions we're having now. I'm excited about where that's going to go, and I'm sure more to come over time. But I'll conclude here and look forward to your questions. And again, thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Just to remind the audience, the Q&A email is on the screen. Please send your questions back here to the back, and we will ask our speaker. First question from the audience, sir. How is Army Futures Command integrating AI and cyber capabilities into its non-kinetic dominance strategy, and what operational shifts do you foresee as a result?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit earlier. The way that we're integrating it is like we're creating an integrated data layer as part of really one of the more critical pieces of what we're doing within Next Gen C2 to be able to enable rapid AI development off of that. We're looking ahead a little bit into how can we better enable partnership on industry side as well as enabling our own soldiers and civilians to be able to work within that environment. AI is not exactly like software applications. Like, yes, we want those to be able to update, relatively rapidly, keep pace, add features, things like that. But AI models, that cycle time is much faster, right? So I don't believe that we can do something like contract for an AI model. I think what we need to be moving toward is something more along the lines of an AI marketplace. And we need to be providing an environment for industry to be able to provide models in. And in terms of how the business side of that would work, the more that we use it, the more that you add feature sets that our units are taking advantage of. My preference would be that that's how we structure, that we make payment structures around. I think that would align the incentives a lot better. We don't have that marketplace today. But I think that's something that we need to, move to. If we're in the old, kind of mindset of how software development works, and especially how software development has historically worked within the Department of Defense, I think we're never going to be able to keep up with what AI can provide us.
Thank you, sir. Next question. How do you guard against heavy reliance on AI reducing soldiers and teachers' skill sets and their own ability to make good decisions?
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to work through. I'll tell you, I don't think the way to understand the answer to the question is to not have any AI, right? I think we need it, and we need to be paying very close attention to that, exactly that question. And I think, there are safer places to do that, including in our, at our home station training, at our training centers, in exercises and experiments. But I think the answer, I agree with the premise of the question, right? You can have a little bit too much AI, a little too less, or not enough, human ethical decision making. We know that these are tensions and challenges that are out there. I just think the best way to do that is to start incorporating this capability in when we have the opportunity to do those in more controlled environments, and start learning about what guardrails may need to look like, where human in the loop may need to be integrated into the system, and things like that.
With the DoD increasingly emphasizing zero trust and post-quantum resilience, how does Futures Command plan to lead multi-domain transformation while ensuring agility and security?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand. To me, zero trust and post-quantum, these are, especially on the zero trust side. I think that ultimately, if we do that well, that's going to enable flexibility. If you look at right now where we don't have flexibility, we've got cross-domain solutions all over the place. We've got separation by enclave. We've got, really network-centric data security. We rely a lot on perimeter defense, not saying that that's not going to continue to be, something that we need to have, but, my view would be, if we're doing zero trust, role-based, attribute-based access control a lot more effectively than we are now, we're inherently going to get a lot of these flexibilities because we'll have a system that is set up to more effectively manage differences between certainly communities of interest within a classification domain. Hopefully one day, actually between different classification domains, and we can look at moving out some of these more complex structures. Like, cross domains, kind of the best of that. The worst of that is, the swivel chair and sneaker net and all these other mechanisms of translating information across domains that can't inherently share. So, I don't necessarily see it as a challenge. I think that's going to help enable flexibility in the future.
Thank you, sir. What are the biggest hurdles the Army faces in deploying AI-driven C2 systems in contested environments, particularly regarding data security and interoperability?
Yeah, well, before we get to data security and interoperability, I think, going back to the electromagnetic spectrum, I think that's one of our more significant challenges, right? This is all reliant on an assumption that we have a good amount of data processing capability, a good amount of data transport capability, and that we're providing that kind of from enterprise, strategic to operational to tactical, and that's a very challenging assumption, right? When we look at the electromagnetic environment, our ability to be seen and targeted, spoofed, jammed, et cetera, and so we do have to get that piece right, and there are a lot of potential solutions for that. There are some that are a lot less mature, including some of the stuff I saw out on the floor yesterday. I was really, really happy to see some of the companies that are thinking a little bit ahead in this area, because I do think there's some interesting solutions that we can bring to bear that can help us with that. But if we can't get that piece right, the data security and interoperability, there won't be anything to worry about there if we can't actually communicate. Data security, I think that kind of goes back to the last question on zero trust and interoperability. My optimism there is kind of rooted in the approach that we took with NGC2 with the blank sheet approach and writing in interoperability from the beginning. Our challenge historically with that, my view, has been we don't get rid of the old stuff, and so we have a backward compatibility requirement that is constraining on the span of things we could potentially build to enable better AI-driven C2 capability, and so I think that plus the evolution of our current systems, it's like that some of that working with mission partners, allies, et cetera, has kind of like been bolted on, not thought about from the security architecture from the very beginning, and so I think NGC2 gives us an ability to hit the reset button. It's in our characteristic of need. It's expressed very clearly in there. That's only a 4-page document, but the partner and interoperability piece is very, very clearly expressed. I think we have the opportunity to know going in as we're building this that it needs to be able to accommodate those use cases. And so we won't end up having to bolt on Band-Aids and other mechanisms of enabling that for systems that weren't really designed to handle that level of data exchange.
Thank you, sir. The next question. You mentioned the Army Software Factory and AI2C. How do you see these programs growing in the future to create more expertise across the force?
Yeah, and I don't know the right answer to that. I just know that, that there's a much larger demand signal from the force for these types of skill sets than what we are kind of producing through our talent pipeline right now. So my first, I guess, part of an answer to that would be, I would foresee, kind of a massive increase in scope, in scale in terms of what we're able to train our soldiers to do. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean from a career field or branch perspective, right? I mean, to some degree, there's going to be a level of software operations, AI knowledge is going to need to be resident kind of everywhere. It's a little bit like, counter UAS, because of that, that's more on the threat side, but because of that threat and its ubiquitousness and its ability to affect all echelons, there's going to need to be some level of proficiency about that, kind of everywhere. More specialized in certain places, but really everywhere down to a rifle squad. And so software operations AI, I think not so much from a threat, but from an opportunity perspective, right? We've seen the massive value in having soldiers that are trained in software operations that aren't, they're not there building, our next data platforms, but they are very specialized in being able to access, utilize, manipulate the data platforms that we already have and the ones that we're experimenting and prototyping with in order to more rapidly react to commanders' information needs for visualization, analysis, particularly on the AI2C side, AI-enabled analysis and planning and many other areas. So I think that demand signal is high. I think we have work to do in terms of what does that force structure look like? How does that manifest at the core level at division? What's really needed at brigade and below? Is that organic? Is that skill sets that come down? Are these ASIs, additional skills identifiers, or are they career fields? I mean, there's a lot more that we need to work through, I think, on that. But I have seen the value of the training that we've been providing in the talent pipeline, and I think one of the best things we can do is continue that and continue to grow that, and consider all these other things as we move along.
With the increase in pace of new technologies and concepts, what changes need to occur to ensure soldiers and civilians are educated on these advancements?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've seen, well, certainly things like this, right? I mean, just us being out there having these professional conversations. I mean, I think these are really invaluable. Hopefully you all feel the same way, having spent your time in here in this week. Also, we've been looking at some of the tools that our partners in TRADOC and the Combined Arms Center have been doing recently. There's one in particular called Quickfire that has been really significant in terms of its ability to rapidly gather lessons learned, observations, focused in transformation contact rotations and areas. But I could see the expansion of that over time. Partnered with kind of an AI tool that can kind of rapidly develop insights based on raw data that's being input into the system, those direct observations. And you can start seeing a lineage between where we think we're going with the Army warfighting concept, looking ahead, our doctrine evolution, but also this very, very rapidly moving kind of observations at the tactical operational level. I mean, these all bridge together at some point. But I think we're really, and through CAC's work, have been making a lot of strides in understanding, characterizing what that looks like at that level. We had something similar for Project Convergence a couple of years ago. It was our AI Integration Center that had brought a tool that allowed us to take all of the kind of daily sit reps, XSums, trouble tickets, all of that information, and you could just natural language query this system, AI enabled, to ask, for example, what happened with the Starlink terminals on Tuesday or whatever? Why did they all stop working, or why couldn't this system talk to that system? And it gave you an answer, and it wasn't necessarily right in every case, but it gave you enough of an insight that you could be a lot more targeted in trying to understand what was going on, and certainly a lot better than reading all of the kind of the raw reports that were being generated and trying to piece it together yourself. So I think that kind of a thing is going to continue to be beneficial, and we'll just need people plugged into that, being able to access that real-time learning, and especially coupled with an AI-enabled tool that you could make queries against. You can kind of tailor it to the things that you're looking to learn about all those experiences. So I think there's a lot of great work that's set the foundation to address that.
Thank you, sir. We have time for one more question. How do we guide and govern agile and flexible CapDev and MatDev processes to minimize waste and ensure the most effective use of limited resources to get .MLPFP integrated solutions to warfighters?
Yeah, I think that is the question. I think that's exactly what we've been focused on in this phase of transformation. Once we start looking at what we're, I think there's a thought out there that we need to continue to reform the way that we do acquisition. And sometimes there's a thought of acquisition, that's the contracting, that's the PMs, that's the PEOs, right? Like, the reality is there's a large part of the institutional army that is involved in so-called big A acquisition and all of that. And ultimately, acquisition isn't successful if it just leads to material that is delivered and sits in a Connex because there was a huge gap in understanding or bad assumptions on the .mil PF piece or maybe other areas. And so I do think that's the key question. I think the evolution beyond so-called programs of record, I think, is going to help a lot, looking at what collections of capabilities bring to bear and looking at those more holistically. I mean, that's not something our system currently is set up or designed to do. All of our individual programs of record and the requirements that drive them kind of come up independently on not necessarily a coherent basis. Really, they're just they're balls that are put in the air or put in motion. So I think getting a little bit of a better handle around that, how some can have implications to the others. The other is just kind of a synchronization across all of those elements within each warfighting function. And so that's something that General Rainey has been leading in recent months from AFC and been providing output to the Vice and the Chief that very specifically look at that question. So that's an early model of it. I would expect that to continue forward and continue to integrate our requirements and acquisition activities so that they are better aligned with that fuller picture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was our final question. Please welcome Mike Black back to the stage.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
All right, that's twice for General Lawrence. Mr. Welch, sir, thank you for joining us here today. We appreciate your perspective and your sharing on how Futures Command works directly with the Army and DoD leadership to accelerate the Army's modernization and transformation efforts. We also appreciate your perspective on the electronic magnetic spectrum challenge and the fact that we have to get that right. In lieu of a speaker gift, a donation will be made to the Signal and Cyber Museum on your behalf. Now, I want to correct one thing that I did say earlier. I mentioned quantum cryptography, and I really should have said post-quantum cryptography. There is a difference in that, and I appreciate the gentleman that shared that with me, so thank you, sir. We are on pace for breaking the record here as far as number of printed badges. Just as of a few minutes ago, we were just 11 people, 11 attendees shy of breaking that record, and we're forecasting to do that. We're on pace, and I'm sure that when General Fredenberg closes us out this afternoon, we will have exceeded that, so I thank you all for that. You can refer to the screens or the show guide or the app to see all the various breakout sessions that are going to be presented this morning. We're going to move into a coffee break in the exhibit hall. I ask that you take that chance, again, final chance to go out and visit our industry partners, all those that have been supporting us. We'll see you back here at 10:15 this morning for a fireside chat with Colonel Timothy Sikora, the commanding officer of the Cyber Protection Brigade, as well as Lieutenant General Paul Stanton, the director of DISA and commander of the Department of Defense Cyber Defense Command. As a reminder, all the sessions in Oglethorpe are being recorded and will be available on demand for viewing at the AFCEA YouTube channel after this event. So thank you. Enjoy the break.